Hey guys, so today we're going to be doing the second video in our Lovable website series. So if you haven't seen the first one, definitely go see it because it does provide, I guess, a bit of information into the website, the basic website that we've built, which is for our Plum Care Solutions client, who's a plumbing business that we've made up, run by a guy called Dave. And it explains just essentially how we've set up this workflow to begin with, particularly around setting up the webhook, which is really important. So definitely go set it up, or go check it out, I should say, and make sure that you've set up that. I do also have essentially all the information in terms of the prompt that I use to build that website, so that you can more or less copy it or put it into ChatGPT and adjust it. And so today what we're going to be doing is expanding upon that and going to the next level. So in that first video, we really just focused on the custom form that is included in here and getting that information sent to us. And then now what we're going to be doing is expanding on it. So again, in the last video, we set it up to basically send a real basic email just to inform the client or that potential customer that we'd received their inquiry and that we would get back to them. So today we're going to be expanding on that, as I said, a little bit more. What we're going to be doing, or the main thing that this workflow here is going to be doing, is two things. So it's going to be adding them to a database that we can then reference in future for things like potentially following up with them, finding work in the future, utilizing them for, say, something like a calendar agent that we can then send automated emails to, or whatever we want to do. And then the second part of this is doing something where we basically assign each person that submits a request through the website an inquiry number, and then we log that as well, so that we can really easily differentiate between customers, or if we have a customer that has been with us previously or been with you previously, we can differentiate between a job that they may have asked about in the past and a new one, so that you can essentially have the same email being, I guess, looked at without having to worry about it pulling the wrong information. So the first one, as you can see here, this first step here that we'll run through basically just grabs the information from our web submission and checks if the user is a current user or a new one. So if they're a current user, they'll go down a separate path line where they don't get added to our client list, but they still get an inquiry number provided to them. So I've got two really basic Google Sheets here. So you can see one that's just the client list with their information, and then the second one that's more or less exactly the same, but it also just includes a few more bits of information that we need to know to basically be able to provide them an automated email based on their request. So just the main things that we've added is the service date, the service required, the preferred date, preferred time, full name, and then just the inquiry number. So what we'll do is I have just pinned some data from a previous execution just to make this process a bit easier. But what we'll do is we'll run through each of the nodes in this first step, and then we'll just run it up to about this section here. And then again, we'll talk through the rest of it. So what we've got is two things going on here. So firstly, what we're doing is we just have a node that basically just cleans up the information in here. That's really all it does, to make it a bit easier to work with further down the track. This second one here will essentially grab our current list of clients, which obviously we have none on here, so it's not going to return anything. And then it also grabs current inquiry numbers as well. So the reason why we need to grab those is because we need to know essentially what the next inquiry number needs to be in essentially the pipeline or in the schedule. So what I am going to do, I did delete some data from here that I was doing earlier, but I'll keep this first one. And what we'll do is we'll come back and we'll just start working through it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to execute up to this point, and we'll see that it's done here. It's now grabbed the information and work through each of the steps here. And then essentially what I'm doing is I'm merging the current information and the current inquiry numbers into here, which I'll just quickly pin this. I'll pin So the reason why this isn't doing anything is because there's actually no data in here. So I probably just really quickly need to put a bit of data in here. So we'll just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Main Street 4321. Cool. So now that I execute that again, it should work. Yeah, cool. So it worked that time. So just as an FYI, you do need to just put some dummy data in the first one here, so that it will actually return something. Because if it doesn't return any data, it won't work. So we'll just pin each one of these as we go through executing. We'll pin that one. And then what we can see here is that we've got these 2 bits of information that will then come and combine them together. So within these 2 sheets here, there's nothing exciting that we need to do, or literally all we're doing is just going get rows and then choosing the document and then choosing the sheet. So it's exactly the same for this one as well. We're just grabbing the document, grabbing the sheet. There's nothing really too exciting that you need to do in there. And in terms of the code in here, I will have this workflow available for you guys to download from my GitHub. I'll have a link to that in the description. But essentially, you won't have to fill anything out if you've followed my first video and you follow the steps that I provide here. So now that we've done that, we can just pin this to, and then we can execute this step. So essentially what we've done now is that we've combined our current contact information, our current inquiry information, and the information that came from our most recent webhook. So we've combined that all into one thing, and then it's going to go through another JavaScript code node. And again, you don't need to worry about knowing all of this, but what we'll do is we'll execute that. And essentially what this is doing is it's checking a few things. Firstly, it's just providing all the details for this current customer. It's checking if it's a duplicate. So it's checking to see whether this person's information is currently within our contact list. So we can just go back to here really quickly and we can see his name's Rick James. That's his email, his address. And what it's doing is checking whether or not that information is currently in our contact list, which it isn't. And so as a result, it's returning a result of false for the duplicate here, which is awesome because we need that for a little bit further down to be able to put it through the right pathway. So we'll pin that to, and then what we'll do is we'll come into this if. So this if node here. So all this is doing is literally checking is if this parameter here is equal to true. If it's equal to true, it will go down one pathway. If it's equal to false, it will go down another pathway. So essentially, the 2 pathways that we have here is if our inquiry is coming from someone that doesn't already belong in our contact database, it will return the customer's query down this pathway here. And really the only difference is that it will add them to our client sheet. So we can see that in here. So what we'll do is we'll execute this step, and then we'll go execute this one too. So essentially what this is doing is just getting rid of the rest of the noise and just making sure that we just have the really critical information that we want. The next thing we're going to do is go into a Google Sheet node here. So you'll just need to add a Google Sheet node that just says append row, select your contact list, and then all we're doing is just dragging these details across here. So we've got first name, last name, email, address, the mobile number, and the address, the postcode, the state, and the city. So this is all the information that we need for our contact database. So what we can do is we can execute this step here. And what we can see is in our client list, we've now had this information added. We'll pin that so that it doesn't redo it. And then what we'll do next is go through this inc sheet. So our inquiry sheet here. So this one's a little bit different. but again, you're following the same process. So you're going to do a new Google Sheet node, do append row. So we're going to create a new row in our sheet, select your inquiry data sheet, and then the workbook, and then the correct sheet. Similarly to the last one, we're going to be sending just some of the details. Again, it's used later in the workflow. So what I think is important is that we're kind of differentiating our client list and our client database and our inquiry database, because we want to be able to reference our inquiry database with the things like specific requests that customer has without clogging up our client list with information that's not essential. We just want our client list to be their contact information. So in this one here, we do double up on some of the information, as I said before, in terms of name, email address, mobile number, address, postcode, state, city, service. So it's important we get a little bit more information because this is essentially how we're going to be basically integrating this with our automation systems that we'll kind of cover in future videos. But for now, what we, I guess, want to add on top of this is we've got our preferred date. What we can have here as well is our preferred time. So just in terms of the preferred time, I do actually need to go back to Lovable and update the custom form, because currently it doesn't have a preferred time in here. And we might actually do that together on the video as well. So what I might just really quickly do is show that for you in case you wanted to say come and update something on your website. So for example, what I would just say on the custom form, please add a field called preferred time under the service required field. This field should be a drop down bar where they can select either morning 7 a.m. to 11 a.m., afternoon 12 p.m. to 5 p.m., or evening 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. So just put in something like that and we'll let Lovable do that, and it will update that. Just while we're working through that, what I'll do is I'll just come back to here, and what we can see is a couple of things. So on our inquiry list here, we can see that the default information that we have for John Doe, the inquiry number is just INQ-6 zeros. So if we come back to our sheet here, what we can see is that we've got an inquiry number that is INQ0001. So where did we get that from? So in our prep data node here, which is the one from back here, it generated us a inquiry number. So the way that it did that was within here, what it does is it takes, it was actually back here. So what it does is it takes any previous or the most recent inquiry number that we have, which was obviously INQ and then 6 zeros, and just based on the logic that we've put into it, which is in here, it will just add one number to the very end of it or increment it by 1, and then provide us with a new inquiry number. So it will always automatically generate you a new inquiry number that is one above the most recent one. So all that we're doing is essentially referencing that in here. And so what you can do is come back to this one here, which is where it was created. And what you can do is just simply find that value there, so the inquiry number, and then we drag it down. And the good thing about N8N now is it seems to have updated where if you're trying to provide data from a node that's not the most recent one, it will automatically work. In the past, you had to specifically reference or type in the reference to the node if it wasn't the one that was previous or directly previous to the current node that you're working on. Another one that I did here as well, which again, you won't have to change anything if you're following along and using the template that I provide, but I did just also essentially add an additional one here. So this isn't something that you can just drag and drop. It does essentially just provide the information from the first name, which is Rick, and then pluses, so it adds together the last name, which is James, to give you Rick James for the person's full name. But again, this will be in the workflow, so you don't need to worry about writing this down or remembering how I've structured this. So what we'll do now is we'll execute this one here. So we'll execute our inquiry sheet. And what we can see now is that this information has been updated. So it's got all this information that we need here. So obviously the preferred time hasn't come through yet because when we executed this workflow, it didn't have the correct field in there. But if we go back to Lovable now, what we should see is that we do have a preferred time. We might just need to refresh it. Cool. So we can see preferred time slot, and then the customer would just select that. So for the sake of the example, what we could do if we wanted to is come back to our webhook node and then just click edit on here. And then we could just manually enter something in terms of preferred time. So we could just go like copy this. And then what we would then be able to see is, for example, if we come down to here, we can see now preferred time morning is included. So what I could do is come back to this inquiry sheet here, and I could rerun this now that I've got that information. But just for the sake of this, I'm not going to do that. So then what we do is this is essentially where we run into more or less exactly the same workflow that we ran through last time. So we have our wait node here. Again, the logic behind that is that we want to be able to provide, I guess, a bit more of a real human feel if something is if our customer submits their inquiry and it comes straight back to them, or that the response comes back to them straight away, it feels very automated. So you can put a wait node in here if you want to just try and provide a bit more of a psychological human feeling to it. And then we go into a send message. So in my previous video, I was using Gmail. For this one, I do have Outlook. So what we might do really quickly is just build the Gmail one together. And then in the template that I provide, I will use Gmail as well. So I've just been trying to play around a little bit with Outlook as well. I have had some clients wanting or preferring to use Outlook, so just wanting to learn a little bit more about it. So we'll just link those up and then we'll set this one up together. So essentially, we actually want to do a send rather than a get. And then we can use all the information from this node here. So we know we want to send the email to Patrick Campbell or PattyCam 0007. We know the subject that we want. We can set it to be, for example, something like Service Inc. or Service, or maybe Plum Care Solutions. Service, and then we can go Inc. number. And then that way it will dynamically grab the Inc. number or the inquiry number that we've assigned to that customer. So that when we're referencing it and they're referencing it, we have that information in the subject heading. So it becomes really easy to search later on if you need to find the email or to integrate with anything else. We're going to change the email type to text. And just for the sake of speeding things up a little bit, I'm going to just grab the one that I built for this. We'll change it to an expression. We'll open this up, and then what we can see is hi JSON first name. So it's just grabbing this information here. Thank you for reaching out to Plum Care Solutions in relation to JSON.service. So that would be toilet seat needs replacing. So again, you can just drag them in. So what I might do is drag them in again. First name. Thank you for reaching out in relation to toilet seat needs replacing. This email is to confirm we've received your request and we will provide you with a quote within 24 hours. Should your request be an emergency, feel free to call us directly. You can put the number in here to request an immediate call out. Thanks, Dave, Plum Care Solutions. So pretty straightforward. And then what we would do is then obviously send that. Just because I don't want you guys to have to sit and wait for this, I'm actually just going to delete that, and we'll execute this step as well. We'll pin it, and what we can see here is that we've had the message been sent, and so what I'll do is I'll quickly bring it up just so you guys can see what it looked like. Cool, so what you can see here is we've got, hi Rick, thank you for reaching out. So exactly the email that we provided before. With this little one here, what I forgot to mention back in here was to just go to add options in your send message node and then append the N8N attribution and just make sure that's flicked off. Additionally, what you can do as well, if you want to get a notification yourself, you could add your email address in as a BCC, so that way you get sent the email if you want it for your own records. But what I have done is essentially added a final step, which is just basically flagging in Telegram when one of these is received or when one of these messages is sent. If you need help with any of the Google credentials or the Telegram credentials, I know I haven't gone through those, but I do actually have a video on my channel around how to set all those up. So for the sake of just saving time on this video, decided to just skip that for now. But there's a really detailed video on how to set all of that up. So if you need any help, you can go check that out and I'll pin it above. So within our Telegram node here, what we have is essentially we've set up our bot, we've got our chat ID, and as I mentioned before, like with the Gmail, we want to basically go down to extra options here, or and just make sure that there's the reply markups turned off as well. And then we've just got the append N8N attribution here as well, and we've flicked that off. So in here, all we've got is just a really basic alert that will come through, and it will basically just say you have a new service inquiry from, and then that's the user, the item or their email, sorry, and then what the service was, so what it is that they're wanting to request. So the reason why this is red at the moment is because I got rid of the wait node, which I'll actually add back now. And what we should then see here is this change. So that's all good. And the reason why this is great at the moment is because this node hasn't executed. So essentially that data hasn't passed through it because it's referencing that it needs to execute. So I've just set this, I'll just set this to 1 second or 2 seconds, 1 second. And then what I'll do is just execute this last one here. So I'll execute the step. And you can see down there, we got it. We'll have a look at it in a moment. But what you can see is now it's sent the information. So you have a new service inquiry from Rick James, email address, and then the message. So if I open Telegram, what we can see here is that we've got our new request. So we can see you have a new service inquiry from Rick James. That's his email, and then this is the message. So that can just be more of a flag for you to understand or to know that you've received one. Or as I mentioned before, you could potentially BCC yourself in if you'd rather get an email rather than a Telegram notification. And what this does is it opens up some really good interactions from a human in the loop perspective, which we'll build on in future videos around, for example, generating draft responses to customers, generating quotes. So for example, we could extend this workflow further, so that whenever a customer basically reaches out via our custom form, not only will it send them a generic response email and inform you, but it could also generate an invoice for you, or it could generate a quote for you, allow you to approve it, and then send it to the customer for them to approve as well. So that way, we're adding further automation to this process, particularly the time-consuming side of things. And that will be in a future video, so definitely keep an eye out for that. So thank you again for following along on this one. As I said, I'll have the workflow saved in a GitHub repo, and I'll provide a link to that so you guys can download that. And then, in terms of the actual Drive documents, they're very basic to set up. You've just got some really basic details at the top here, so it shouldn't take you long to copy and paste those. But yeah, in the next video, we'll continue to expand on this, and a few of, I guess, the areas that we'll be going into is going into a bit more detail with the chat bot that we've set up here as well, and how you can actually integrate that using a similar process to the webhook that we have here. It will be a RAG agent so that it will grab live real data, provide customers with the actual information that they need. As I mentioned before, we'll look at building on this current workflow to add in invoice or quote generation, and a few other exciting things that I'll keep to myself for now, so you have to keep an eye out for those. But thanks again, appreciate your time.